People love saying home is where you're safest. That's one of those sayings folks repeat without thinking too hard about it. Because if that were true, I wouldn't still wake up some nights with my heart pounding like I'm 12 again, staring at a ceiling that doesn't exist anymore. My name is Evelyn Moore. Most people just call me Miss Evie now. I'm 72 years old, sitting on a narrow porch in late summer, watching dust drift across a road that barely remembers my footsteps. The paint on this house is peeling, the rocking chair creaks, and still, this is the first place I've ever lived where I can breathe without permission. I waited a long time to tell this story. Not because I forgot it. You don't forget things like this. I waited because for decades I was taught that silence was survival, that good girls didn't talk, that families stayed together no matter what happened behind closed doors, that shame belonged to the one who spoke, not the one who caused it. I believed that for a long time. But silence has weight, and after enough years it starts to crush you. I grew up in a small Appalachian town called Briar Hollow, tucked so far into the hills people joked the sun had to ask permission to get in. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody minded everybody else's business, except when it really mattered. Our house sat at the end of a gravel road, 3 rooms, thin walls, no locks that worked the way they should have. My mother called it cozy. My father called it good enough. I called it something else, though I didn't have words for it yet. I was the second child, the wrong kind. My brother Caleb came first, loud, charming, golden in my father's eyes. He could break a window and get laughed at for it. I could spill milk and get stared down like I'd committed a crime. Dad worked long hours and drank longer nights. Mom stayed quiet and busy, like if she kept her hands moving, the rest of life couldn't catch her. That's how women survived back then, by shrinking. When I was little, Caleb taught me how to climb trees and skip stones. People saw that and smiled. Protective big brother, they'd say. Nobody ever asks what protection looks like when the doors are closed. The first time I realized something was wrong, I was too young to name it. I just knew my stomach felt tight, like when a storm's coming but the sky's still blue. I remember standing in the hallway, barefoot, listening to voices through a wall that didn't block sound or secrets. I remember wishing I could disappear into the floorboards. And I remember thinking, clear as day, that if this was what family felt like, then something was broken. I just didn't know yet how badly. And that was only the beginning. Fear doesn't always show up screaming. Sometimes it slips in quiet, settles down like it owns the place and rearranges your life without asking. By the time I was 8, I knew how to read footsteps. My father's steps were heavy and uneven, meant trouble. My mother's were quick, careful, meant hide it. And my brother Caleb's, those were the hardest to read, sometimes light, sometimes slow, sometimes stopping right outside the door a little too long. Our bedroom was small, 2 narrow beds pushed against opposite walls, a single window that rattled when the wind felt like showing off. When we were little, sharing a room made sense. That's what folks did when space and money were tight. But kids grow, and boundaries are supposed to grow with them. Ours didn't. At first, it was things I couldn't explain. Him sitting too close, his arm staying around my shoulders longer than it needed to. Jokes that made my face burn, even though I didn't understand why. If I pulled away, he'd laugh. If I stayed quiet, he'd smirk. "You're too sensitive, Evie," he'd say. "You gotta toughen up." That phrase showed up a lot in our house. I tried telling my mother once, not directly. I didn't have the courage for that. I just said, Caleb makes me uncomfortable sometimes. She froze, just for a second, a flicker. Then she went right back to scrubbing the sink like it had personally offended her. "He's your brother," she said softly. "He don't mean anything by it." That was the first time I realized something important. She knew. Maybe not all the details, maybe not the full shape of it, but she knew enough to be afraid, and afraid enough to choose quiet over truth. After that, I stopped asking for help. At school, I became the kid who disappeared into the back row, the girl teachers described as well-behaved and easy. Those words usually mean invisible. Caleb, on the other hand, became everything people admired: captain of the baseball team, always smiling, always helpful, the kind of boy folks said would go far. Nobody ever looks twice at boys like that. Things escalated the year my body started changing. It was like a switch flipped in him. His eyes lingered in ways that made my skin crawl. His voice dropped when he talked to me, slow, low, private. "You're growing up," he said once, blocking the doorway so I couldn't pass. I nodded, staring at the floor. "Don't let boys get ideas," he added. "I'll know." Know what? I didn't ask. Nights were the worst. The house went still and my thoughts got loud. I learned how to breathe shallow, how to pretend sleep, how to fold myself inward so I took up less space in the world. Fear has a shape. For me, it looked like a bedroom door at night. And every time it opened, even just a crack, I felt something inside me pull tight, like a rope being stretched 1 inch closer to snapping. I didn't know it then, but my childhood was already ending, and I hadn't even reached the worst part yet. There's a moment in every child's life when innocence doesn't disappear. It gets stolen. Mine didn't happen all at once. It happened in pieces, small ones, quiet ones, the kind nobody notices unless they're looking for them. By 10, I'd learned how to make myself small in ways that went beyond corners and shadows. I learned not to react, not to flinch, not to cry where anyone could hear it. I learned how to swallow fear so deep it started tasting normal. Caleb stopped pretending after that. He didn't rush it. He didn't need to. He had time, power, and a house that bent around him like it was built that way on purpose. He'd come into the room late, acting casual, sit on my bed like it belonged to him, talk about school, about Dad, about nothing at all. His voice would be calm, almost gentle. That made it worse, because monsters aren't always loud. Sometimes they whisper. I tried locking the door once. He broke the latch and laughed like it was a joke. My father yelled at me for damaging the house. My mother fixed the door and said nothing. After that, I stopped trying. The bathroom became my refuge, until it wasn't. The hallway became a trap. The kitchen felt safe only when all 3 of us were there and the radio was on loud enough to cover silence. I started wearing baggy clothes, my dad's old shirts, anything that hid me. Caleb noticed, of course. "Don't flatter yourself," he said once. "I know what's under there." That sentence still makes my hand shake. I remember the night everything crossed a line I couldn't uncross. It was summer. The air was thick, cicadas screaming outside like they knew something bad was happening and wanted witnesses. I don't need to describe what happened. I won't. What matters is this. I learned that night that saying no doesn't mean anything when the person hearing it knows nobody will stop them. Afterward, I lay there staring at the wall, trying to understand how pain could exist without leaving marks anyone cared about. I remember thinking, if I don't move, maybe this version of me will disappear. The next morning, my mother noticed the way I walked. She didn't ask questions. She brought me warm water and herbs. Her hands shook when she touched me. She knew then, and still, nothing changed. From that point on, my life split in two. There was the girl everyone saw, the quiet one, the obedient one, and then there was the girl who lived only at night, counting breaths, counting ceiling cracks, counting the years until she could escape. Caleb started acting like he owned more than the house. "You don't belong to anyone else," he told me once. "Remember that." I did. I remembered it every time I smiled at school, every time I said I was fine, every time silence wrapped itself tighter around my throat. By 12, silence knew my name, and it wasn't done with me yet. Puberty doesn't ask permission. It just shows up one morning and changes the rules. My body betrayed me quietly at first. A little curve here, a little weight there, nothing dramatic, nothing anyone should have noticed. Caleb noticed everything. His moods shifted with my shape. When I stayed flat and small, he ignored me more. When my body changed, he watched, too closely, like I was something he was waiting to unwrap. My father, on the other hand, acted like I didn't exist at all, unless dinner was late, or the house wasn't clean enough, or he needed someone smaller than him to unload his anger on. That left my mother stuck in the middle, doing the math every day about which silence would cause the least damage. At school, health class came and went like a joke nobody explained. They separated boys and girls, handed us pamphlets, and told us to be careful. Careful of what? Nobody said. The first time I bled, I thought I was dying. I locked myself in the bathroom, shaking, staring at the red like it was proof I'd done something wrong just by existing. My mother showed me what to do without meeting my eyes. "You're a woman now," she said. I wanted to scream. Being a woman felt like a punishment. Caleb got worse after that, more possessive, more entitled. He didn't even try to hide it anymore when nobody else was around. "You're not a kid anymore," he whispered once. "You should be grateful I'm teaching you." Teaching me what? How to disappear inside myself? I learned how to leave my body without moving, how to stare at nothing and feel nothing. Dissociation, they call it now. Back then, it was just survival. I stopped eating much. Food felt heavy. Everything felt heavy. Teachers noticed but didn't ask the right questions. Neighbors commented on how mature I was getting. Nobody ever asked why. There was one woman on our street, Mrs. Adler, who looked at me like she saw something wrong. She'd offer me lemonade, ask if I was sleeping okay. Once, she even said, "You know you can talk to me, right?" I almost did, but fear has a long memory. I remembered my father's hands, my brother's smile, my mother's silence. So I said I was fine. That night, Caleb punished me for talking to her too long. I learned then that even hope could be dangerous. By 13, I understood something no child should ever have to understand. My body didn't belong to me. It was something other people decided things about, took things from, blamed things on. And the worst part? Everyone acted like this was just the way things were. But deep inside, buried under fear and shame and exhaustion, something small and stubborn stayed alive. A thought. This can't be all there is. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But somewhere inside that broken little house, a future version of me was already planning her escape. Life has a cruel sense of timing. Just when you think you've learned how to survive the worst of it, it finds a new way to test you. I was 14 when my body started sending signals I didn't understand at first. I felt sick in the mornings, dizzy. My chest hurt in a dull, aching way that wouldn't go away. Food made my stomach turn, except for the strangest things: salt, vinegar, bread soaked in milk. I told myself it was nerves, or stress, or God punishing me for thoughts I didn't even remember having. Denial can feel like hope when you're desperate enough. The truth didn't hit me all at once. It crept in slowly, like a shadow stretching across the floor. A missed cycle, then another, then the way my belly felt different, tight, unfamiliar, wrong. One afternoon, I locked myself in the bathroom and counted on my fingers. I counted again and again. My knees gave out. I slid down against the tub, pressing my hand over my stomach like I could push the truth back inside me. I wasn't crying yet. I was past crying. I was terrified. 14 years old, still a child, and carrying something I never asked for. I didn't need anyone to tell me how it happened. I knew. I'd always known. But knowing and accepting are two different kinds of pain. I thought about my father, what he'd say, what he'd do. I thought about my brother's face if I spoke, the way he'd smile like he already won. I thought about my mother, how her shoulders would slump, how she'd whisper prayers instead of taking action. There was no safe place to land. I tried to hide it, wore layers, pulled sweaters tight even in the heat. I wrapped cloth around my stomach so tight it left marks. Every breath felt like a lie. But bodies don't keep secrets forever. My mother noticed first. She always did. She walked in on me changing one morning and froze. Her eyes went straight to my belly. Her hand flew to her mouth like she was trying to catch a scream before it escaped. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." I broke then. The tears came hard and ugly like they'd been waiting their turn for years. I shook so badly she had to sit me down on the bed and hold me like I was 5 again. "I didn't want this. I swear I didn't." She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. We didn't tell my father right away. Fear ruled that house, and fear makes cowards out of people who might have been brave in another life. For a while, we lived in a suspended nightmare, pretending nothing had changed while everything had. My brother kept coming, kept touching, kept acting like nothing was different, like he didn't notice, or worse, like he didn't care. Each night I lay awake wondering what kind of world lets a child carry a burden like this and still calls itself decent. I didn't know how this story would end. I just knew something inside me was breaking and something else was being born, and neither of them asked for my consent. Pregnancy doesn't stay invisible for long, especially not on a child's body. By the time summer rolled in, my clothes betrayed me no matter how carefully I layered them. My stomach pushed forward like it had its own agenda. My back ached. My feet swelled. I moved slower, heavier, like I was walking underwater. At school, teachers stopped asking questions and started avoiding my eyes. Girls whispered, boys stared. Nobody said my name out loud anymore, just that girl. At home, my father noticed too. He didn't ask gently. One evening, after too much whiskey and too little patience, he grabbed my arm and demanded answers. His voice was low, dangerous, the kind that meant there was no right thing to say. My mother tried to speak. He slapped her so hard she fell into the table. I'll never forget the sound of that. I stood there shaking, holding my stomach, every instinct screaming to protect what was inside me, even though it came from pain. Caleb stepped forward then, calm, confident, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "She's been sneaking around," he said. "I tried to warn you." Just like that, a lie slid into place so easily it made me sick. My father believed him, or maybe believing him was easier than facing the truth, easier than admitting the monster lived under his own roof. The punishment came fast and loud and without mercy. Words first, then hands, then rules. I wasn't allowed to leave the house anymore except for church, so everyone could see my shame. I stopped being a daughter and became a lesson, a warning, a burden. Caleb played the hero, the concerned brother, the man of the house in training. At night, when everyone slept, he leaned close and whispered, "You see, nobody's ever gonna believe you." That's when I understood something terrifying. The truth didn't matter, not in a world built to protect men like him. My body grew heavier. The baby moved, tiny flutters at first, then real kicks. Each one was a reminder that something innocent existed inside something cruel. I started talking to my stomach in whispers, promising things I didn't know how to give. "I'll get you out," I said. "I don't know how, but I will." I meant it with everything I had left. The day my water broke, the house was quiet, too quiet. My father was gone. Caleb was out. My mother knelt beside me on the floor, pale and shaking, but focused. "You're strong," she kept saying. I didn't feel strong. The pain lasted forever, hours folding into each other until time stopped meaning anything at all. I bit down on a cloth to keep from screaming. I didn't want them to hear. When the baby finally arrived, small and red and perfect, something cracked open inside my chest. Love, real, fierce, unstoppable love. I held that baby, my baby, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I was willing to die for. That was also the moment I knew something else. Staying in that house would destroy us both, and no matter how scared I was, leaving had become the only option left. They named him without asking me. My father stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, looking down like he was inspecting livestock. My brother hovered behind him, quiet now, watchful. "A boy," my father said. "At least something good came out of this mess." Something good. My baby lay against my chest, warm and breathing, his tiny fingers curled like he already understood how to hold on. I didn't care what they said. I didn't care what name they chose on paper. In my heart, he was mine. They let me stay in the back room with him, but freedom wasn't part of the deal. If anything, the walls closed in tighter. My father drank harder, my brother watched more closely, and my mother, she moved like a ghost, helping when she could, apologizing with her eyes every time she couldn't. The baby cried a lot at first, hungry, uncomfortable, new to a world that had never been kind to me, so how could I expect it to be kind to him? I learned how to feed him, how to rock him, how to quiet his cries before they reached ears I didn't trust. I learned how to sleep sitting up, how to stay alert even when my body begged to shut down. Motherhood didn't scare me. What scared me was raising him in that house. Caleb started saying things that made my skin crawl. "He's got my eyes," he said once, smiling like it was a compliment. "Strong boy," he added. "I'll make a man out of him."
I held my baby tighter after that. Every instinct in me screamed danger, not just for me anymore, but for him. At night, when the house finally went still, I whispered promises into my son's hair. "You're not staying here," I told him. "You're going to have a life where nobody hurts you. I swear it." I didn't know how I'd keep that promise. I had no money, no education, no one on my side except a worn-down woman who'd already given up on herself. But promises don't ask if they're realistic. They just demand to be kept. I tried leaving once, wrapped my baby in a blanket, stuffed a few clothes into a grocery sack, took one step onto the road before my father caught me. The beating was quick, quiet, efficient. After that, the doors stayed locked. The second time I tried, my brother found me before I reached the fence. That time, the threat wasn't aimed at me. "If you ever try again," he said calmly, "I won't miss." Something in me went cold. I stopped trying to escape physically. Instead, I started planning, watching, listening, waiting. Fear still lived with me, but it was different now, sharper, focused, the kind of fear that turns into resolve if you let it. Because when you have nothing left to lose except your child, you learn patience. And patience, I would soon learn, can be more dangerous than rage. Waiting can feel like doing nothing, but sometimes waiting is the hardest work there is. Days blurred together after that. Feed the baby, clean the house, keep my eyes down, keep my mouth shut, survive. I learned the rhythms of the place like a prisoner learns guard schedules. When my father drank himself into a stupor, when Caleb went out with friends, when my mother's hands were free long enough to help me without being noticed. My son, my boy, grew fast, too fast, like he was racing the danger around him. His first laugh startled me so badly I cried. His first time gripping my finger felt like an oath. I named him in my head, a name nobody else knew, a name that belonged only to us. Saying it silently became my anchor. Neighbors noticed him. Some looked away. A few tried to help in small, careful ways. Diapers left on the porch, a blanket appearing like it had wandered there on its own. Kindness in that town had to travel disguised, or it didn't survive. There was one girl I met at church, Lena, new in town, sharp-eyed and unafraid. She talked too loud, asked questions nobody else did, and didn't treat me like a cautionary tale. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked one afternoon, casual as talking about the weather. My heart slammed against my ribs. "All the time," I said. She nodded like she already knew. "If you ever need help, say the word." Hope is dangerous, but so is despair. I started hiding money, coins first, then small bills. I stitched them into hymns, tucked them inside jars, folded them into places nobody looked twice. It wasn't much, but it was something. Caleb grew restless. He drank more, talked bigger, started acting like the house already belonged to him. Sometimes I'd catch him watching my son with a look that made my blood run cold. "He'll be just like me," he said once. "No," I answered before I could stop myself. The room went quiet. He smiled, slow, mean. "You don't get a say." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I held my baby and counted breaths, promised myself that whatever it took, whatever it cost, I would not let that future happen. Then, something unexpected cracked the door open. My father got sick. At first, it was small things, less drinking, more coughing, then missed work, then days spent in bed, angry at his own weakness. The house shifted. Power always does when its senses change. I watched carefully. Every moment felt like balancing on the edge of a knife. One wrong move and everything would collapse. But deep down, For the first time in years, I felt it. Not hope, opportunity. And I knew when it came, I'd have to move fast, because chances like that don't knock twice. Illness changes a man faster than time ever could. My father went from loud and dangerous to quiet and brittle in a matter of weeks. His skin turned gray, his hands shook. The same hands that once ruled the house now struggled to lift a glass. Nobody said the word dying, but it sat in every room with us. My mother hovered, torn between duty and decades of fear. Caleb paced like a caged animal, irritated by the shift. He hated weakness, especially when it wasn't his. For me, it was complicated. I didn't feel sadness the way people expect you to. I didn't feel relief either. What I felt was watchful, like the world had paused, waiting to see what I'd do next. The night it happened was unremarkable. No lightning, no drama. Just a quiet thud from the bedroom and my mother's scream cutting through the house like a blade. By morning, the man who controlled everything was gone. The town gathered fast. They always do when death gives them something to talk about. People shook hands, brought casseroles, spoke kindly about a man they never truly knew. He was strict but fair, someone said. He worked hard, another added. I kept my eyes on my baby. Caleb stepped into his new role like it had been tailored just for him. He spoke for the family, signed papers, accepted condolences with a practiced seriousness that made my stomach twist. At the graveside, as dirt hit the coffin, he leaned close and whispered, "Nothing changes for you." But he was wrong, because something had already changed inside me. Fear was still there, but it had shifted. It wasn't the all-consuming monster it used to be. It had edges now, limits. I waited for the will. When it was read, the truth landed exactly where I expected. The house, the land, everything left to Caleb. My mother and I were allowed to stay as long as he saw fit. As long as he saw fit. That night, lying awake with my son curled against me, I realized something important. This was it. If I stayed, this would be my life forever. If I left, I might lose everything. But staying meant losing my child in ways I couldn't bear to imagine. So I did the scariest thing I'd ever done. I chose the unknown. I didn't tell anyone, not even my mother at first. I gathered what I could: documents, clothes, the money I'd hidden over months of waiting. Lena came through just like she said she would. Quiet rides, quiet planning, no questions. The morning I left, my mother stood in the doorway, eyes red, hands shaking. "I know," she whispered. "I always knew." That hurt more than anger ever could, but she stepped aside. I didn't look back, because some houses don't deserve a goodbye, and some futures only open when you finally walk away, even if your hands are shaking the whole time. The road out of Briar Hollow didn't look special. That almost felt like a trick. No sign, no warning, just a stretch of cracked pavement curling between trees like it had no idea it was about to change someone's life. I remember thinking that if freedom was real, it should look bigger than that. But freedom rarely announces itself. It just waits to be chosen. Lena drove. I held my son tight in the back seat, every bump in the road making my heart jump. I kept expecting headlights to appear behind us, kept imagining Caleb's truck roaring up, horn blaring, his voice tearing the morning apart. It didn't happen. Mile by mile, the town slipped farther away. The church, the school, the house, all shrinking in the rearview mirror until they were nothing but shapes I could finally stop naming.
At the bus station, everything felt too loud, too open, people everywhere, moving like they had places to be and choices to make. I felt small, but also invisible. That helped. Lena squeezed my hand before I got on. "Don't come back," she said, not unkindly, not even to prove something. I nodded. I knew she was right. The bus smelled like old vinyl and diesel. I chose a seat near the back, pressed my forehead to the window, and watched the hills flatten into unfamiliar land. My son slept against my chest, warm and trusting. That trust nearly broke me. Halfway through the ride, panic hit hard. What if I couldn't do this? What if I failed? What if the world outside that house was just another kind of trap? Then my baby stirred, opened his eyes, and smiled at nothing in particular. That was enough. We arrived in a city I'd only ever heard about in whispers, buildings stacked high, streets full of strangers. Nobody knew my name, nobody cared where I came from. For the first time in my life, that felt like a gift. I followed the directions Lena had given me, 3 buses, 1 long walk, and a knock on a door that could have changed everything or ruined me. A woman answered, older, kind eyes, no judgment. "You must be Evelyn. Come in." That was it. No questions, no accusations, no past. That night, lying on a narrow bed in a small room that smelled like clean sheets and possibility, I listened to my son breathe and let myself believe something dangerous. That maybe, just maybe, we'd crossed a line Caleb couldn't follow. But I also knew this: survival doesn't end when you escape. It just changes shape. And the hardest part was still ahead. Freedom doesn't feel like joy at first. It feels like exhaustion, the kind that settles into your bones once your body realizes it's finally allowed to stop running. The first weeks in the city were a blur of routines and nerves. I worked where I could, cleaning, cooking, folding other people's lives into neat stacks. The woman who took us in didn't ask questions. She paid me fairly. She treated me like a human being. That alone felt unreal. My son adjusted faster than I did. He laughed at strangers, reached for light, slept without waking up crying. Watching him heal made me realize just how deep my own wounds went. At night, when the city quieted, the memories came back. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like waves hitting the shore over and over again. I'd flinch at footsteps in the hallway, lock and unlock the door 3 times before sleeping, wake up sweating from dreams where I was back in that house, unable to move. But each morning, the door stayed closed. Each morning, no one came. Slowly, something inside me softened. I changed my name, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted ownership. I wanted to choose who I was instead of being told. I learned how to take the bus, how to read maps, how to stand in line without feeling like I didn't belong there. Small things, but each one stitched a piece of me back together. There were moments of doubt, moments I wondered if leaving had been selfish, if my mother needed me, if I should have stayed to protect her the way she never protected me. But then I'd look at my son, safe, curious, free, and the guilt would quiet. One afternoon, a man at work tried to touch me without asking. I stepped back and said, "Don't." He laughed. I didn't. I reported him. He was fired. I went home shaking but proud. For the first time, my no had weight. That night, I held my son and cried, not from fear, but from relief, because I finally understood something no one had ever taught me. Survival was never the end goal. Living was. And I was finally learning how.
I used to think that once you escaped a place, it stopped existing. That's not how it works. Trauma doesn't stay behind like old furniture. It travels light, slips into your suitcase, waits patiently. Years passed. My son grew from a toddler into a boy with opinions, scraped knees, and endless questions. He loved trains, loved dogs, loved stories before bed. I worked 2 jobs most days, came home bone tired, but it was a good tired, the kind that came from effort, not fear. We moved into our own tiny apartment, 1 bedroom, peeling paint, a window that looked out over an alley. It was perfect. Still, there were moments. Certain smells, whiskey, old wood, could knock the breath right out of me. Loud male laughter made my shoulders tense. When my son reached certain ages, certain milestones, memories crept back in uninvited. I never told him where he came from, not because I was ashamed of him, because I refused to pass the poison on. He deserved a childhood without shadows leaning over his bed. Once, when he was about 10, he asked about his father, just once. "He's not part of our lives," I said carefully, "but you are loved more than anything." That satisfied him. Children don't need every truth, just enough safety to grow. I sometimes wondered what happened back in Briar Hollow, whether my mother was still alive, whether Caleb had married, had children of his own. The thought made my stomach twist, but I didn't look back. Healing, I learned, isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with a single breakthrough moment. It comes in pieces, quiet ones. It came the day I laughed without checking who was listening, the day I slept through the night, the day I realized weeks had passed without a single nightmare. Still, one thing remained unfinished, the story. I had lived it, I had survived it, but I had never spoken it. And silence, even chosen silence, still has a cost. I didn't plan to tell anyone. It just happened. I was in my 60s by then, my son grown, kind, thoughtful, the kind of man who holds doors open and listens when people speak. He had a family of his own, children who ran through my small house like sunlight. One evening after they left, I sat alone and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace, and with it, clarity. I realized I was no longer protecting anyone by staying quiet, not my son, not myself. The only person silence still served was the past. So I started small. I wrote things down, not details, just truths, how it felt, what it took, what it cost. Then one afternoon, sitting on my porch, I said the words out loud for the first time, not to anyone in particular, just to the air. This happened to me. The world didn't end. No lightning, no punishment, just a breeze moving through the trees like it always had. That's when I understood something important. Shame survives in darkness. Truth survives in light. I didn't tell my son everything. I told him enough for him to understand my strength, enough for him to know where his came from. He cried. He hugged me. He said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." That healed something deep. I don't need justice now. I don't need apologies. Time already took care of that. What I needed was my voice back, and I took it.
People still say family is everything. I don't argue anymore. I just smile and let them believe what they need to believe. Family can be love. Family can be safety. But family can also be the place where pain learns your name. What matters isn't where you came from. It's what you choose to carry forward. I carried my son out of that house. I carried myself out years later. Today, I sit on this porch in the quiet, watching the light change, knowing this. I survived. Not quietly, not easily, but fully. And if you're listening to this, if any part of my story feels familiar, hear me now. You are not weak. You are not broken, and it is never too late to choose yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave. If this story reached something deep inside you, if it reminded you of a silence you've been carrying or a strength you didn't know you had, please don't scroll away just yet. Tell me in the comments, do you believe it's ever truly possible to escape the past, or do we just learn how to live stronger than it? Hit like if this story moved you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because the next voice you hear might sound a lot like your own. And remember this, some stories aren't told for attention. They're told so someone out there realizes they're not alone. Thank you for listening.